always come back.
He sure does, but it's a real shame none of the other villains do, though. So, today we got another discussion video. How we doing, everybody? And as you can clearly tell, we're going to be talking about some FNAF villains, and pretty much mostly the villains that got sidelined or booted out of their own stories for one reason or another, mostly so that William Afton could come back, and then all of a sudden he didn't come back. So that's kind of the general idea, but we're going to go through a handful of the villains, majority of like the main ones. So we're going to be covering Circus Baby, we'll briefly talk about Ennard, and then we'll talk about Vanny and the Mimic, because those are like the main villains, especially Vanny and the Mimic for like newer games. And then we'll do a little bit of talking about William Afton and his potentially original plan to return in the newer games until people didn't want that, and then he got booted out of his own game. So even William Afton got booted out of games. So we're just going to talk about all villains, and that's kind of going to be it. But this video is a little bit of a special one since it is the fourth part in my problems with FNAF series, and is actually going to be the grand finale of my problems with FNAF series. So I've already made a few other videos, two of which are covering FNAF theories, one of which is just covering FNAF in general, and we're going to end off talking about FNAF villains. And so this is going to be potentially a little bit of a longer one, and going to be a lot more, you know, discussing. And so it's just going to be the grand finale, and then we'll be done with talking about problems with FNAF. So I hope you guys enjoy that. But anyway, we're going to just get right on into this video, and we'll start with talking about Circus Baby and going through her sort of early appearances, like when she was actually influential to the story, and talk about how she got a complete character overhaul and basically booted out of being a villain. But before we really get into it, I'd really appreciate it if you guys went down and subscribed, and also left a like if you wanted to, just because, you know, making these videos, it means a lot to me, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So just having you guys go down and support me that way would just really mean a lot to me. So I just appreciate it if you guys did that. But anyway, let's just get right on into this. Alright, so to start off, we'll be talking about Circus Baby. So basically, I want to kind of almost split her section into two sections. I want to talk about her in the games, and then her in the books, because there's quite a bit of difference, and the books really do affect the games. So there's a lot to talk about here. But Circus Baby in the games started off in, technically, she was first introduced in a hidden cutscene ending in FNAF World, where she's first introduced like, hey, you know, take your seats, the show's about to start. Doesn't really affect anything, but I just thought it was worth mentioning, where the first tease of this new villain character was first, you know, introduced. So introduced in FNAF World, a little bit of setup, but her first real time she's a villain, and really the only time she's an actually good villain, is in Sister Location, where despite not being seen, and something that I make fun of her for whenever I get the opportunity to. How about that, huh? How about we don't? How about you go back to Sister Location? Oh wait, you're not even in that game. Despite not showing up, is still somewhat of a compelling villain in the game. She gives off the idea of a tragic backstory, and she really kind of does have a tragic backstory, both as Elizabeth Afton and as Circus Baby, because they are two different entities, pretty much. And I'll talk about that in a minute as to why that makes her such a cool villain. So, tragic backstory wise, Elizabeth Afton, her side of the story is pretty sad, right? William basically kind of neglected her until she died, because she really wanted to see Circus Baby, and William's like, no, you can't. And then eventually Elizabeth was alone and got not chomped, clamped, maybe is the good word to use, by Circus Baby, and thus went on to possess her. So pretty tragic there, because, you know, she wasn't. It's just tragic. You guys get that. It's tragic. I don't really know to explain why that's tragic. It's tragic. But on Circus Baby's end, it's a little bit more interesting. And I think this is something interesting to talk about, the fun times in general, which will be their own video at some point, because I have a lot of topics I want to cover this year in discussion videos, and the fun times are one of them. But I think the fun times aren't necessarily, I think they're possessed, but I think they're also primarily AIs. And part of me thinks this mostly because of how Circus Baby talks in the game, in Sister Location, because she doesn't talk as Elizabeth, she talks as Circus Baby. And we know this when she's giving her backstory in, I think it's in the secret one in night 3, where you hide under the desk and she talks to you, and she talks about how, yeah, I was out once, I had my own restaurant, right? I was there on stage and I could see their kids, and I was counting, like, 3, then 2, then 4, then 3, then 5, and she's like doing that, right? And she's talking from the perspective of Circus Baby, not Elizabeth, because she's like, and then there was one, and something bad happened. There's something bad within me, right? She's talking like that, not like, oh, well, something bad, happened to me. It's something bad happened in general. She's talking like Circus Baby. She's not Elizabeth. She's just Circus Baby, who happens to be possessed by Elizabeth. And you can also see this in Ender Night, where she talks as Circus Baby, saying like, hey, why don't you just like stop and let us in? Like, she doesn't say that directly, but she tries to taunt you to give up. And then she also uses Elizabeth's voice, because she thinks that we're William, right? That's kind of a big thing in the game. She thinks we're William, and that'll come into really big importance in the next game. But she thinks we're William, and she kind of uses that to taunt us. And she uses Elizabeth's voice, and she's like, hey, it's Elizabeth. I thought you wanted to come see her or see me or whatever. And while she might say like, hey, I thought you wanted to see me, I think she says see her in Elizabeth's voice, but she kind of is very distinctive of the two. She's not Elizabeth, she's just Circus Baby, but she talks about Elizabeth as a separate entity, which gives me the idea that not only is Elizabeth in there, but Circus Baby's AI is also in there, which would kind of bring up some fun villain ideas, especially if it's like maybe a split personality thing, which we don't really see in Sister Location. But I think the idea of her just being Circus Baby and using these other means to get what she wants done is really compelling. And even how she talks to us in the game, she's very persuasive, very like, I'm here to help, until night 4, and then she's back to being like, I'm here to help. And she basically manipulates us into doing what she wanted us to do in the first place. She's not a mindless animatronic, she's a smart animatronic. So there's something special about her that's not just Elizabeth. And that could have been really cool to play up in Ennard, and even on her own in Pizza Sim, because through like, what was it, source code and stuff like that, we knew that Circus Baby was coming back as her own character. So even with that, they could have done Circus Baby really cool in Pizza Sim as like a secondary antagonist to us, but also not necessarily buddy with William, seeing as she wanted to gut William like a fish. So we could have potentially had some cool stuff there, and maybe not had her just be like directly antagonistic, but like, hey, I'm back, I'm sorry, I didn't want to do that, it was something bad that happened to me, right? Like, and play up on that more in Pizza Sim. And then the game came out, and she was nothing like that. She was just a mindless servant to William Afton, which she got that from one place in the books. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but I think it's fair to talk about Pizza Sim first, because it's a fairly easy thing to go over. So Circus Baby went from a kind of compelling, tragic villain who could manipulate their way out of any situation, and just basically became, I'm evil, I want you dead, and I'm here to serve William, despite the fact that I wanted William dead literally one game ago. That's something that will always baffle me, and I didn't really even realize until like, honestly, a couple months ago. And I never even really thought about the fact that Elizabeth in sister location is like, you're William and I want you dead. We're going to use you because you made us and you tormented us, and we're going to use you to escape because we kind of want you to, you know, be our vessel and we want you to die. Like, they don't like us. Circus Baby does not like William. And then in the next game, she's like, oh, William, my dad, because now I'm just Elizabeth. I wanted to serve you the whole time. I didn't want you dead. I'm not sure what happened. Like, maybe she got booted out of Ennard. She became Scrap Baby. And then, like, on their way here, she bumped into the Scrap Trap. And she was like, whoa, wait, William, that's you? I thought I gutted you. Maybe that was Michael. Whoa, what, Dad? It's so great to see you again. Let's catch up. Like, I don't know what the heck happened. But now she just likes William and wants to serve him. And then she gives, like, a half speech at the end before she got cut off by Henry, who also really shouldn't be there, but he gave a cool speech, so there's at least that. But she kind of is just a... I mean, I don't know why she gave a speech, but she's not Circus Baby. Like, whoever showed up in Pizza Sim is not Circus Baby. And I honestly don't really know what else to say about her in the games. She shows up in other games like Help Wanted 2, stuff like that, but I don't really feel like that's super relevant as to the fact that timeline wise those are basically just games within the universe, so take that with a grain of salt. But she's okay in those. She's kind of back to regular Circus Baby, more so in Help Wanted 2. She's more back to that manipulative, but they don't really take into, like, they don't really affect the story all that much, in my opinion at least. But I thought that was at least worth mentioning. But why does she act that way in Pizza Sim? Why does Circus Baby all of a sudden change into a completely different character in Pizza Sim? Well, like I said, that all stems from the books. Now, the Twisted ones had come out, I think, before Pizza Sim, and the Fourth Closet didn't come out till after Pizza Sim, I think. I'm pretty sure it was within, like, the range of there. I think it came out after, but it was pretty close within that range of the Pizza Sim time era. So why does Circus Baby all of a sudden change for the games? Well, it's so that she can match the books, and Pizza Sim is kind of really sucky for that, and this really kind of, you know, makes me hate Pizza Sim more. Pizza Sim was already my least favorite FNAF game, and it's more so now. I've been watching this channel, what's their name? Not real name, not at all. That's their channel name. They go over a whole bunch of, like, FNAF related stuff. I've been kind of binge watching their content because it's really good, so I'd recommend it. It's kind of fun. But they do a lot of talk with the books, which is good for me because I didn't really have any way to understand what happened in the books. But as they talk, like, as the channel she talks about in her videos, she talks about the books in a way that I've never really thought about, and how they basically ruined Pizza Sim. And that's why Circus Baby is the way she is in that game, because of how she was being written for in the Fourth Closet. Because in the Fourth Closet, Circus Baby shows up, kind of. She's Fourth Closet Charlie, Circus Baby Elizabeth, throwaway character, henchman, pretty much. She's like 10 characters mixed into one, or like 10 characteristics mixed into one. So she's kind of really sucky in the books, but she's basically just William Afton's henchman. And guess who's William Afton's henchman in the games at around the same time that book was being made / coming out? Circus Baby. So in an effort to make the games more like the books in Pizza Sim, a lot of villains had to take the backseat or get completely rewritten for that to work. And Circus Baby was one of those. She got screwed over by the books, which honestly super sucks, because if there's like I don't like Pizza Sim. Pizza Sim's my least favorite game, except for the Tycoon section. That's super fun. But like the game itself, gameplay, story, all that kind of stuff, super sucks. But what's worse than Pizza Sim is every single FNAF book. I honestly don't think there's a good FNAF book out there. I haven't read them all. I'm planning on getting like the Tales from the Pizza Plex books and the I'm going to get to them at some point, I promise. But from everything I know about these books, every single FNAF book super sucks. Yet they keep getting made and they keep being important to the games for some reason. And I just think that's what really failed Circus Baby, is how she was written in the books. She could have been such a cool character, and then she got screwed over for a piece of literature. So, anyway, that's kind of it for this section. Went on a bit rambly tangent there, but I think it's all at least important to talk about, especially because like she was gonna be the next villain, and then became a henchman, and she wasn't even Circus Baby anymore. She was just Elizabeth Afton in a robot body, which is not Circus Baby. Circus Baby is not Elizabeth Afton in a robot body. So she got kind of switched around, a little bit topsy-turvy, and became somebody stupid, I'm going to say. Became a stupid character, so. And I really feel like there's not really much hope for her to come back as a cool villain, because what are they going to do? Make her come back in one of the games? How? She's dead. So, anyway, that's kind of it for her section, and we'll move on to Ennard, who we'll have a little bit less to talk about, but I still think is deserving of their own section, because Ennard is cool, and Ennard got screwed over even more than Circus Baby, to be honest. Ennard got like super screwed, almost worse than everybody in this video. So we're gonna move on to Ennard, and yeah, we'll go from there. So moving along to Ennard, who I said I would give his own section. It's not going to be a very big section because there's not really a whole lot to talk about here. But Ennard was the villain set up at the end of Sister Location, right? All the fun times merge into one animatronic, who then goes on to wear Michael Afton as a skin suit. And they walk around and they're like, hey, you know, we're finally free, but we're like this cool villain who can basically take over people's bodies. That's an actually interesting concept to take for the animatronics, because we know in like the early games, the idea is the animatronics want to put us into a suit. So I like the reverse of, instead of putting a human in an animatronic suit, you're putting an animatronic in a human suit. And I think that's pretty cool. That could have set up a lot of cool things of like, is this person possessed by Ennard? Right? Like, is this a freshly captured person that Ennard is now just wearing around so that they can blend in? They're hiding amongst the population? Like, that could potentially bring up some really cool and interesting things. And the fact that they can mimic voices, seeing as Circus Baby was able to, in Ennard, clone Elizabeth Afton's voice, which means that they can clone voices. So, presumably, a villain who can mimic things and could potentially be anybody or any suit. I think you kind of see where I'm going with this, but we'll get to that in a second. His next appearance technically is Pizza Sim, where he shows up as Molten Freddy, and the ball really dropped on that one. He went from a cool animatronic who could potentially be or do anything to just Funtime Freddy 2. And I'm not going to complain about the design, because I actually don't mind the design. I think it makes sense. People don't like that he's a big pile of wires, despite the fact that Ennard was a big pile of wires after leaving Michael. So it completely makes sense that Molten Freddy is a big pile of wires. But I think for me, the biggest thing is that he kind of just gets pushed to the side again, right? Just like Circus Baby, and even like William. I think the issue for me with Pizza Sim is that all these like villains, so you have William, you have Ennard, you have Circus Baby, and then you have the puppet. So you have FNAF's top villains or characters all crammed into one game that you're going up against, and they all have the same mechanic. And I think that's the biggest issue for me. And some of them kind of fall flat more than others. For me, obviously, Scrap Trap / William is sort of like the main antagonist because it's William Afton. And then Circus Baby's kind of there. She's at least, you know, visible. You can tell who she is. And, you know, she's at least there. Molten Freddy is just poor man's Ennard. It doesn't really continue on the cool idea of what he could be, or even the idea that he can, like, become anything. He's just kind of there. and mostly sidelined by Scrap Baby and William. And then the puppet just kind of got left behind. So kind of sad there. But I think Pizza Sim is really where we get to see Ennard basically forgotten. At that point, Ennard was dead. Once Pizza Sim came out, Ennard was dead. He was no longer a character. He didn't exist. And then he died in a fire. So there's that too. But that's kind of really the end of Ennard, because he doesn't really come back at all after that. Mostly, I mean, maybe the Blob. I'm going to do a theory on that at some point, but that's not even Ennard anymore. That's not even Molten Freddy. That's just something else. So Ennard died before he even made it to his next game. And it's really sad, because he could have been such a cool, compelling villain in the fact that they can mimic and do anything. And then he got booted out. But he did come back in some things like Help Wanted and Help Wanted 2. But, you know, those are just like minigame, whatever. And he was cool in those, but that's not really like a coming back as a villain. And I think the biggest thing for me is that you get the Mimic, who's literally just Ennard 3, because Molten Freddy is Ennard 2. So the Mimic is just Ennard 3, the prequel, because I guess he's older than Ennard, presumably, I guess. But I feel like the Mimic kind of takes the idea of Ennard being this kind of almost not soulless, but pretty much like the soulless, creepy animatronic villain who can potentially become anything, and just gave it to a new character, right? Those traits from Ennard just went to a new character. So Ennard kind of just got replaced by a clone or by a copy of himself as a new villain. And we'll get to the Mimic later. He's going to be the last guy on this list, but just thought it would be fair to at least give my respects to Ennard. So there's my talk about Ennard, and we're going to move on to the new era of FNAF with Vanny, who we'll probably have quite a bit to talk about. So Vanny getting sidelined by pretty much everybody really hits home for me, because I was so hyped for Security Breach when it was coming out, and the idea of this new mascot killer who is being either controlled by William or, you know, influenced by him, and now she's like basically become the new William Afton. But like, there's this idea that maybe, you know, she's not fully in control. It was pretty cool. Vanny was pretty cool. I was hyped. And then Security Breach came out, and I was like, where the heck is Vanny? She's not even here. So Vanny was set up as this cool new villain who had a knife and was potentially going to be hunting people and potentially killing people, and then she's not even really there. Like, she's just basically not there at all. It's worse than Sister Location, honestly, because at least Circus Baby was talking to us. And I'm not counting Vanessa, because I'm not counting Vanessa. I'm only talking about Vanny. So Vanny got at least some endings, I guess. And obviously the more important one is the save Vanny, whatever. But she just got sidelined a ton in Security Breach. And I honestly don't even know for who. Like, who sidelined her and why? So we could get more time with the glam rock endos? So we could get more time with, I don't know, running around the Pizzaplex? Like, I don't know, maybe instead of the Mazer size thing being, hey, you're up in Mazer size, go halfway across the building to go grab this other thing, and then run all the way back. Maybe throw a Vanny thing in there, right? There's a section where Vanny shows up in the sewers where you're running through and you get to the Post-it note room. I didn't even know she showed up there until I watched it on a YouTube video, and I'd played through the game twice. I'd played through that section twice, and I didn't even know she was freaking there. So she barely doesn't even show up. She shows up like 3 times, I think. And my more recent playthrough, which is like over a year ago, I think she only showed up once for me, maybe twice. But she showed up at, you know, the start where she's like in the office and she's like, hello, I'm Vanny. And then she like skips down the stairs and she's kind of like hanging out around there. And I think that's really the only time I saw her. Like, she just doesn't show up, and she doesn't have a presence. She's not even a villain in the game. I don't even know what she is. She's just not there. And that's the biggest thing with pretty much every game that she's supposed to be in. Help Wanted 2 is included in that. She was supposed to have a huge role in that, and she shows up at a final scene, or like what the secret ending, where she, I guess, maybe kills Glitchtrap, which there's hope for Vanny yet, which I'll talk about closer to the end of the section. But even then, her only appearance is crushing Glitchtrap. But in the files, she was supposed to have a much larger role. And then they cut her out of Help Wanted 2 for what? It made the game worse because the game doesn't have a freaking story. So why not just keep it in there? Why not include her? I just don't get it. Because it's not like they're sidelining Vanny for the Mimic. It's not like they're sidelining Vanny for, I don't know, a different villain like Burntrap. Because those characters hardly show up in their respective games anyway. So why is she getting sidelined? Like, it just baffles me. It really does. They had this villain that could have been cool, which admittedly she is just an Afton clone, but that's kind of the whole point of her character. So it's not like they made a new character oblivious of the fact that she's an Afton clone, because she's supposed to be an Afton clone. But you have this character that could be really cool, and then in Security Breach she got replaced by nobody. She's just not there. And then Help Wanted 2 she got replaced by nobody, and she's just not there. So her just getting cut from everything, it baffles me. I just don't get why. To save on time, maybe, but I don't know. I just think that's probably the biggest thing with Vanny as a villain, is the fact that she's just been pushed to the sidelines, and it really sucks. Like, imagine Security Breach coming out, and instead of it being the way that it was, you get this cool, interesting story of there's this rabbit lady character who's going around, she's causing chaos, she's hunting us down throughout the Pizzaplex almost constantly, and then, you know, you have to deal with her. She's manipulating the glam rocks, which is kind of assumed but never really told to us. So she's trying to manipulate the glam rocks. She's trying to, you know, gain control of the Pizzaplex in order to carry out her continued plan of, you know, hunting down kids and to bringing back Afton / Burntrap. So she's got all these plans in place, and then from there, you know, you get a final confrontation with her. You get a final boss fight with Vanny, where you have to, like, I don't know, deal with her in some way, shape, or form. It's just kind of sad because a lot of that stuff got, you know, removed, and just, it would have been so cool to see her as a villain. There's this one thing, I was watching a video the other day, and they were talking about Shattered Freddy, right, who doesn't even show up in the game. And this gave me a cool idea that could have been used for, like, Vanny and her taking control of Freddy, because we know that she can't take control of Freddy because he's in safe mode, right? But there's cut content of him getting beat up by the other glam rocks. They beat him up and they make him shattered, and then he somehow gets controlled by Vanny because he's no longer in safe mode. So how cool would it have been if we see the glam rock animatronics slowly get corrupted throughout the game, and we kind of see Vanny do that, and she's corrupting the robots, and then we get to a tragic scene in, like, Phaser Blast or something, where Freddy gets ambushed by the other three shattered glam rocks, and Vanny's there, and she's, like, basically commanding them to tear apart Freddy, kind of similar to the ending, but they tear apart Freddy, and then Gregory runs because Freddy's like, get out of here, and that's some of his dialogue. He's like, run, get out of here. Gregory runs, and he's, like, hiding, and he's all sad because he thinks Freddy's dead. And then we get this creepy thing of, like, maybe we, like, look up when we see Vanny in her, like, security office control room through the window, and she's like waving up there, she's smiling at us and she's waving, and then we hear the Shattered Freddy being like, you know, superstar, right, and some of his cut dialogue, and give this thing of, like, Vanny finally won. She has control of Freddy. Our one safety she took from us. She now controls him, and then we have to, like, deal with that or something. But just giving her more of a presence like that, like seeing her directly control the glam rocks, or directly, you know, take our safety away by controlling Freddy or something like that, just would have been so much better. or even her showing up in an actual boss fight ending. Like, just something, but she's not there. And I won't say Burn Trap cut her out of the game, because he's hardly even in the game either. He's in one obscure ending that you have to, like, maybe that's not, okay, obscure is way too generous. It's like kind of easy to get to, but he's in this ending that you kind of have to work hard to get to. And when you beat him, you know, nothing really, he's not really even a villain. He doesn't talk, he's just there. So Burn Trap's not even a villain either, but it is William Afton, so there's that. But it just feels weird with Security Breach because there's not even really a villain. Like, honestly, Roxy's more of a villain than Vanny. So I just, you know, feel really bad for the fact that Vanny's just gotten cut out of everything. And Help Wanted 2 could have given us a more sympathetic Vanny side, but where there's hope for Vanny yet is in Help Wanted 2 and that ending. And I think they could do something really cool with this. So we know that Vanessa, just in general, she's okay, but she's not necessarily the greatest person, right? And people can say, well, that's just, you know, Vanny messing with her, but how she kind of talks to Gregory and how she kind of talks to the animatronics, she doesn't really seem like the greatest person to hang out around. So she's not a great person in general. We know Gregory's a little scumbag who just kills everybody, so he's not all that great. And we also kind of see that in Ruin, where Gregory's like, all right, you're dead, Cassie, because, you know, you don't want the Mimic to follow us, so you're dead. So these people aren't necessarily all that great. How this ties into Help Wanted 2 is that we see Vanny, and I just finished this the other day, so I got to experience this in VR, in person, so I know what I'm talking about. But when Vanny crushes Glitch Trap, right, and you see her, she crushes him, and then she like waves and she fades off into the darkness. It's not like Vanny's gone, she just walked away. So I think where they could take Vanny in an interesting turn is, instead of Vanny being controlled by William or Glitch Trap or whatever, have Vanny get rid of William and then just still be Vanny. Now she's just doing this on her own accord. Because I think we do kind of have an issue, we as in FNAF fans, have an issue of, you know, wanting characters to be good. Sometimes I think characters are just bad though. But I think Vanny could be an interesting idea of, well, what if Vanny still exists, but she's not under the control of anything? She's just evil. She's just Vanny. And I think they could easily do something with that. Like, Vanny still exists, but she's not controlled and forced to do somebody else's agenda or will anymore. Now she's got her own plans that she can do, but it's still Vanny. And I think there could be something cool with her character, but that's kind of it for this section. You know, a little bit of a longer one, but just, I don't really know. I'm kind of fumbling this ending, but I really do hate how much Vanny's been cut out of stuff. It could have been so much better if FNAF just moved on with a new villain. And speaking of a new villain, I think it's time to talk about the Mimic. Alright, so I'm going to do some talking about the Mimic, and then we'll probably kind of wrap things up with talking about William slash, you know, just, I guess just William. So, but the Mimic is our newest villain to FNAF, and, you know, their whole shtick is that they mimic things, and they can wear different kind of animatronic suits. That's really generally about it. So, the Mimic mimics things. We've seen that before, but, you know, willing to give them a chance, and especially because they're having their own game come out. So, you know, at least giving them a chance to shine as a villain. But I do think what we've seen of them so far, including in the books, honestly kind of super stinks. Like, they're really not that compelling of a villain. So, at least in the books, they have a decent backstory, I guess. I mean, it's not great. He was built to, you know, I guess be a dad. And then when David was trying to get his ball and he got hit by a car. What's his name? Edwin got angry and beat up the Mimic, and then the Mimic's like, I guess I'm evil now and I'll beat people up too. And then he started beating people up, and then they just threw him in a basement and were like, stay down there. And then he got up to some shenanigans and stuff like that in the epilogues and whatever. So it's okay, I guess, but it just doesn't feel all that, you know, cool. And maybe if they built up on it some more, it would be better. But I think the games are honestly even worse, only because he has a less compelling backstory. Like, he's literally just a robot, and that's honestly about it. Like, he's just a robot, and that's it. And the fact that they want me to care about this guy and think that, like, he's been a manipulator. He's been in the background this entire time, since before we even FNAF 4. He's been, you know, in the shadows. The Mimic's been here the whole time. He's this super scary villain. The only issue is you can't make a compelling villain if their origin, like, I'm trying to figure out how to word this good, but you can't make a good compelling villain that's like, they've been here the whole time. If you have to literally make up the fact that they've been here the whole time, like, having the Mimic have their own game that's a prequel game just to say that they've been here the whole time is a cop-out at best. They have no connection to any other FNAF game. They've not been here from the start. You're just telling me that because you're making this up on the fly. Like, I just don't even know what to say. There's nothing compelling about the Mimic to me. I couldn't care less about them as a villain because they haven't been here since day one. If you maybe told me, like, I mean, honestly, I don't know how you can have a villain that's been there since day one that's not William, but if you maybe were like, tried to connect some dots throughout all the games and are like, well, these pieces of evidence actually could support the fact that there's been this character that's been here from day one that's more of a villain, yada yada yada, like, you connect some points together and there's actually tie-ins to these other games, I'd believe you. But the fact that the Mimic just showed up in Ruin and then now in their own game, and I'm expected to believe that they've been the secret villain the entire time, it just is lackluster at best. Like, just move on from the past, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you're trying to make a new villain, just move on. Stop trying to make this new villain actually be an old villain. Just stop. Just stop. Like, when we wanted a FNAF prequel game that takes place before FNAF 4, we were thinking something more along the lines of, like, maybe seeing William, you know, doing some not good crime stuff, or like maybe there's a tragedy that takes place before FNAF 4, like something that's more compelling that ties into these games, and not stinking, my name is Edwin and I built the Mimic and everything's falling apart and I have Giant Music Man for some reason and I have a big toy factory that looks like a straight up Happy Playtime and I have no connection to any of the other games. You know, it's just here. There's just nothing compelling. I don't feel compelled to like this guy as a villain because he doesn't have any connection to anything. There's no connection to characters. There's no connection to other FNAF games. There's literally nothing. Like, he's just there. Now, I knew that the Mimic was going to show up like in Ruin, right? Like, everybody kind of knew that Gregory wasn't the real Gregory, and then it turns out to be the Mimic, and it's like, whoa, he's in the games. That's so cool. But why are we taking villains from the books and putting them in the games? It just doesn't make sense. And I guess kind of with what I'm saying in terms of like book connections and game connections, Into the Pit was a fun game because it connected to the Into the Pit book, but not the main series of FNAF games. So that's perfectly fine by me. I don't care if there's a time-traveling ball pit and a creepy-looking spring Bonnie that's actually some sort of agony-fueled monster. I don't care, because it's its own separate game. But having the Mimic show up as a new villain, even though they're from the books, and then now they're just expected to be the game's next villain, despite the fact that we already had a villain, it just feels weird. Like, why? I will say, I guess in the Vanny section, I said that nobody really replaced her. I guess I kind of lied. The Mimic does actually replace Vanny, because Vanny could have been set up as another cool villain that kind of carried on throughout the games. And then they said, nah, you know what? Screw Vanny. We don't need her. Let's bring in this other character from the books because we want to. And we're going to say that we've had this planned from the start, despite the fact that it was clearly obvious that they were going to bring back William Afton. And then people were like, we don't want William Afton back. And then Scott and Sewell had to, like, it's like a panic. The whole room was on fire. They had to, like, throw all their plans out and rechange everything they were working on because they were going to bring William back. And then people didn't like that, despite the fact that people also do like that. And so now they had to come up with the idea that the Mimic's actually been their main villain all along. We just didn't realize it. You're not fooling me. You're not going to fool me with that one. The Mimic was not planned to be the villain until they needed a villain for Ruin, and they said, shoot, we can't do William. We're going to sideline Vanny because we don't like her, despite the fact that other people do like Vanny. We don't like her, so we don't want Vanny coming back. Let's do the Mimic because we can, and we're not going to give him a backstory in the game. He's just going to be there. So you're going to go, why the heck is the Mimic here? And we'll just tell you. And then you're expected to like the villain because he's there. And maybe Secret of the Mimic will do a good job at connecting things and making things make sense. But I think if you have to create your own separate prequel game just to explain why they've been here the whole time, you're not really doing a great job of making a new compelling villain. In my mind, at least. Like, it just really seems like you're not really trying to make a cool villain. You're just, I don't really know. I can't talk about the Mimic anymore. It's just making me frustrated. So I'm going to be done talking about the Mimic, and I want to do some more talking about William because I did kind of briefly mention what I want to talk about with him in a second. But I just think we'll move on to talking about William and why all of these problems with these villains, every single issue that we've had with all of these things that I've talked about in this probably incredibly long video, is all our fault. What do I mean by all of this is our fault? So, the fact that William Afton was the villain for the first 4 FNAF games, and then kind of leading into Sister Location a little bit, but then he came back as like the main villain of Pizza Sim, and was kind of like one of the main characters of the original 6, kind of 7 games if you include Ultimate Custom Night. So William was a big deal. He was a big character. And then the games wanted to move on, right? You get to the Steel Wool era, they're making Help Wanted, right? They're kind of trying to move on from the old games, move into a new setting. But they did bring back William as a villain. Glitch Trap is William Afton. I used to think he wasn't. I used to think Glitch Trap was just Mimic 01 program, but I honestly didn't know what the heck I was talking about. Glitch Trap is supposed to be William Afton. I think there's not really any question there, or at least like maybe not exactly him, like maybe not his spirit, but at least a program that is him in some way, shape, or form. But it was supposed to be William coming back. And I think there's no better evidence of this than Security Breach. There's the Security Breach trailer where there's a dude like, you know, you will bring me what I want, and if you fail, you will both of you burn. And he's like super kind of goofy sounding. And that's Burn Trap, right? Burn Trap was William Afton. And I already made a whole video on this. It's one of the earlier discussion videos that I've ever made. William is Burn Trap. It's what's left of the Spring Bonnie suit. The body in there is William Afton. William Afton was supposed to come back as the main villain of Security Breach. He was the main villain of Help Wanted. He was going to come back, like he always does, as the main villain. But then everybody was like, oh no, we don't want William back. We're sick and tired of William. We don't want him back. Despite the fact that everybody loved William Afton as a villain, so they went, shoot, we got to bring William back. So then they did, and then we all said that we didn't like William as a villain, and we wanted to move on from the villains. Like, we wanted to move on from William and get new villains. So then they kind of tried to do the best of both worlds with Vanny and Burntrap, right? Burntrap was going to be the main villain, but Vanny was going to kind of be there as a secondary antagonist villain. And then people, you know, didn't like William coming back. Everything kind of got screwy. It went sideways. And then they kind of just dropped William because people didn't want him back. Despite the fact that people also now want William to come back as a villain. And I really don't know what people are doing these days. But I think the issue, and I have kind of a good, I guess, example, or like, what's the best word to use for it? I don't know. But like, a good comparison. That's the word I'm looking for. A good comparison to a different group of fans that I also kind of fall into a little bit. I'm not as fanatic in this, but I fall into this group. Lego Star Wars. This is going to come out of nowhere, but Lego Star Wars. The new Lego Star Wars sets that they produce are smaller, but more detailed. Which, in like the late 2010s and early 2020s, people love. When the 2022 ATTE came out, people were like, this is the best one yet. Who needs those large scale play sets when we have this? Because this is detailed, this is cool, and I don't care if it's a smaller build, it's a cooler build. And then the 2025 ARC 170 came out, and everybody hates that because they said, oh, it's way too small, and I'd rather have a bigger build that's more fun to play with than a smaller detailed build. Despite the fact that literally 3 years earlier, they said they liked a smaller detailed build than a larger playset. I think that's what we're seeing here in FNAF. People went, we love William Afton as a villain. He's such a cool villain. We want him to come back. And then they started bringing him back. And then almost immediately, everybody said, oh, we don't want William Afton to come back. That's stupid. And so then Steel Wool and Scott were like, well, okay, we're screwed. We had William Afton coming back as a villain, like he always does, and nobody wants that. We're screwed. And so now they're kind of like fumbling the ball. They're trying to find a new villain to use, which is why the Mimic showed up. But they're trying to find a new villain to use because they can't use William because nobody wants William to come back. But honestly, having William come back would have been a better option than whatever the heck we're getting here. So I really think a lot of this is on us, as in FNAF fans, because we just want William Afton to come back, and we couldn't care less about new compelling villains. Circus Baby, cool. She's cool. I want William to come back. I don't care about Circus Baby. I want Springtrap, right? I think that's the biggest issue. And when I say us, I don't necessarily mean every single FNAF fan. I'm not one that really cares to have William come back. I'd be fine with somebody like Vanny or Circus Baby back in the day, right? I think it's fine to get some new what the heck happened there? Some new villains in here and not just use William. But I would be really interested in seeing where they were going to originally go with William as the new villain, not new villain, as a continuing antagonist in like Security Breach and stuff like that, because I just would be curious to see what they had in mind for that before everybody got upset that William was coming back, because everybody did get upset when Security Breach was coming out and people heard that Burntrap was in there, right, and William was coming back. Everybody got pissed that William was coming back. They did not like that. They did not like that Glitch Trap was William Afton, and I remember that vividly. People might like it now, they didn't back then. And I think that's what super sucks about all these new villains, is that either these new villains are just thrown in because old plans got tossed because of what we thought as fans, or Springtrap / William Afton just trumped everybody else, like Circus Baby and Ennard in Pizza Sim. Like, William Afton was going to come back. He had to, and he kind of just trumped everybody else in that game because it's William. So I just think it's super sad that we wanted William to come back and then we didn't, and now everything's kind of gone screwy with villains and games. So I just think it kind of sucks, and that's really kind of that. So we're kind of done with the video. It's probably a bit of a longer one, which is fair. This is almost like the grand finale of my problems with series, so it's kind of fair that it's a bit of a longer video. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the summary section, where I'll kind of go over each of these themes that I talked about in a fun and voice acted way where I can have, like, you know, there'll be some voice acting. It'll almost be like a little skit, and you guys will hopefully enjoy that, because it's just a fun way to summarize the video rather than sitting here and being like, so in section 1 I talked about this, in section 2 I talked about, like, that's a stupid way to do a summary. So I think a fun way to do a summary is to just, you know, make it fun. So anyway, I hope you guys are gonna enjoy. I don't really know what it's gonna be yet. I haven't gotten that far, but I hope you guys are gonna enjoy it, and I'll see you on the flip side. Last minute reshoots, but I have to record this sick, but here we are. Today we're going to be talking about the 5 main villains from Five Nights at Freddy's, starting with contestant number 1, Circus Baby. She's new, she's here, she's cool, and then she got turned into a henchman by the next game, basically screwed over, and then she disappeared. She's not come back yet, unless you count Help Wanted, but I don't really count Help Wanted, so she's not really come back. I guess maybe she isn't an after all. Contestant number 2, Eddard. He showed up at the end of Sister Location. He was cool. He was also new. He was going to be the new big bad. And then he got replaced and forgotten and ignored. And basically just left to the dust. What happened to him? Nobody knows. Going on to Vanny. She got replaced and pushed out and ignored and cut out of 2 games. Like her own 2 games. So she has that bad end of the stick. She's got it way worse than everybody else, but still deserves our attention. Moving on to contestant number 4, we have the Mimic, who showed up and is expected to be a super cool villain that everybody likes, but just showed up out of nowhere. It doesn't really have any, you know, connection. Moving right along to William Afton. He showed up. He was the big bad, and he was supposed to continue to be the big bad in the new games, and then people didn't want that, so they had to quickly replace him with the Mimic. And now he's also just forgotten off to the sideline. Anyway, that's all we have today, folks. Just a bit of a, you know, going over all the contestants that we have for the video. And we'll move right on along to the outro. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that summary. There was hopefully a little bit of voice acting in there from yours truly, so I hope you enjoyed that. And this kind of brings us to the end of the video, and the end of my Problems with FNAF miniseries, I guess you could say. It's been a long road getting from there to here, and honestly, it's been a lot of fun. Being able to go through and talk about FNAF theories and various issues I have with them, just talking about my issues with FNAF and with FNAF villains, it's really nice to kind of just get my ideas and opinions on these things out there and potentially even stir up some talking. And even if it's only a few hundred people, you know, it still means a lot to me that my opinion can be put out there and that, you know, I get to just kind of talk about this stuff because it's something I'm very passionate about. So it is a little bit sad to see the end of this mini-series, but I have a lot of new and upcoming projects, I guess you could say, that I want to start. And so we're going to be kind of entering a new season, if you will, of FNAF discussion videos, because I think it'd be fun. You know, a lot of YouTubers do this kind of stuff, and I think it'd be fun to have an unofficial season 2 of FNAF discussion. So like maybe a little bit of a revamped style, revamped stuff, I guess, and we'll kind of do some new projects and some new fun things that are going to be, you know, discussion video related. So a couple of those, kind of moving into that topic idea, are going to go up on my community post where I put up a poll, which is going to be up now as of watching this video for you guys. So there's a poll up on my community tab that is going to be something you guys can go vote on to see which topic you want me to cover next. And some of those topics that I was talking about for unofficial season 2 is a couple of fun ones. A new theory, because theories are always going to persist on this channel, but a new theory talking about security breach and connecting it to Pizza Sim and kind of giving my ideas on that. Another topic, which is going to be kind of the new mini-series, is covering different FNAF games and redesigning their animatronics. So For example, the first one that's going to be up on the poll is redesigning the Pizza Sim animatronics. So for example, going through and being like Scrap Trap, just sort of update and touch up his design. Not like a drastic overhaul, but like just a basic character redesign while still staying true to the original design, but just tweaking it to make it better. So that'll be for like Scrap Trap, Lefty, you know, the main animatronics of Pizza Sim, and that'll be a series that will go through almost every FNAF game, at least the ones that I'm like, they kind of need a redesign. So that's going to be this sort of new mini series, and I have a couple other ideas that'll be up there, so definitely go check out the poll. I'd really appreciate it to see what you guys want me to do next. And yeah, I look forward to moving into sort of a new era. We're almost reaching the 1 year of discussion videos, about a little under a month away from the 1 year, which would have technically been a better time to do the season 2, but I still think it's fun to kind of start it now because it just feels like a good starting point. We're getting into almost April, so but with that, we're gonna kind of end things off here. So shameless plugs as per usual on the channel. Go check them out. My Instagram's down below, and my channel membership is also down there. And for a channel membership, you get some fun perks with that. Like, you get some exclusive behind the scenes content of unedited videos. So for example, if I recorded for like an hour, but then I only posted 20 minutes of a video, then I would upload the full video and you guys get to see some content that you would normally never get to see. So that's one of the fun perks you get. And another perk that you get for being a member is a shout out in every video. So here's a shout out for my current channel members. Thank you guys so much for being my members. I really do appreciate it. It just means the world to me that you guys are, and is a bit of a motivating factor to, you know, keep going. So thank you guys so much for that, and here is your daily shout out. And yeah, with that, I thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and this series that's been going on for a few months now at this point, because the Problems With has been a pretty decent going on series. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And for your question of the day, who's your favorite FNAF villain? That's your question of the day. So comment that down below if you made it this far in the video. Who is your favorite FNAF villain? And with that, I will see you in tonight's live stream. Goodbye.